Hey, welcome everyone to Fluid Movement in Cells. This is lesson B4. And the first thing is that when we talk about a cell membrane, the cell membrane, it's what we call selectively permeable, meaning it only allows certain materials to cross through it, right? This is different than permeable. If something is permeable, it means that all material can actually go through it, where impermeable means that no material can go through it. Right, so as we've got things here, they're going to come through until it's nice and even, but things that we would have on this side, not all things would stay. Some of the stuff would just stay on this side outside and not pass through. So the term diffusion, and this is something we've gone through in previous years, but is really the movement of particles in all directions and spread from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Now, diffusion plays a part in moving substances in and out of the cells and ensures the same amount of a substance will be inside and out. If we take a look at that previous diagram, we saw the diffusion of these blue particles coming through until we had an even concentration on both sides as time moved on. Uh, right, so we've got these two figures here, and you're asked to copy them out into your notes here, where we've got equal concentration of carbon dioxide both in and out. Now we still see movement through because carbon dioxide can come in and out of the cell. But if there was a greater concentrations inside than outside, then the arrows coming out are much bigger than those that are coming in. And we got these tiny little arrows coming in. Okay, pause the video, write these out, and then unpause in order to continue. Now, osmosis is a special type of diffusion. It is diffusion, first of all, of water. Nothing else. It's just talking about water, and it's passing through a selectively permeable membrane. Now, an example of this would be like the tea bag, where the tea bag, it's this mesh bag, it allows water to go through, right? But the tea leaves stay inside the tea bag. And again, water is going to move from a place of high concentration to a place of low concentration, just as in regular diffusion. So here we see osmosis. It's got water molecules passing through this selectively permeable membrane, where diffusion is just anything kind of going from an area of high concentration to low concentration, right? So it must be water and must be the membrane to be this particular type of diffusion that we call osmosis.
Cells have a pretty sophisticated cell membrane, which acts as a barrier to the outside world. We've described this membrane as selectively permeable, meaning not just anything can get through it. The key to this phrase is that the cell membrane is selective, but not impermeable. This is something like how you would keep your home. The walls of your house create a boundary and define the space, but there are still doors and there are windows through which you can let in your friends or some fresh air on a summer's day. So what crosses a cell membrane and why? Well, There are several types of ways to transport things across a cell membrane. When and how things travel depends largely on the concentration of solutes in your cells or the dissolved molecules. In this lesson, we'll discuss methods of transporting solutes across a concentration gradient. A concentration gradient is a gradual difference in solute concentration between two areas. In this case, it's the difference in solute concentration between the outside of the cell and the inside of the cell. Solutes here would move by diffusion, or movement from a higher concentration of solutes to a lower concentration of solutes in order to equalize solute concentration. This evens out the concentration on both sides. This is like what happens when you leave the windows of your house open while your neighbor's having a barbecue. The smell might diffuse from next door, where the smell is stronger in the air, into your house, where unfortunately there are no hamburgers on the grill. Diffusion occurs until the inside of your house smells like the outside. Diffusion across the cell membrane is a type of passive transport, or transport across the cell membrane that does not require energy. Remember that the cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer. Although the inside and the outside of a cell are both water-based, there is a hydrophobic region in the middle, and this is an important barrier to anything large, charged, or hydrophilic. Molecules that are hydrophobic, just like the hydrophobic region, can pass through the cell membrane by simple diffusion. Therefore, simple diffusion is the unassisted passage of small, hydrophobic, nonpolar molecules from higher concentration to a lower concentration. Very small molecules can slip through the cell membrane too, even if they are hydrophilic, just like a few ants might crawl through a crack in the wall just because they're tiny. So how do large, charged, or hydrophilic molecules pass through the cell membrane if they can't simply...
Okay, that went into a little bit more detail than we needed to, but it's just the idea of things will pass through. I'm going to continue on, finishing off. They're going to talk about active transport, or facilitated diffusion, which is one that requires energy. Again, we're mostly concerned about the passive or by diffusion.
Just diffuse in. Well, think of how your friends come into your house. Under most circumstances, they'll use a door. A package delivered at your residence would come through your door too, but it would need someone to carry it in. A fly might come through an open window on its own, while a squirrel could come down your chimney. There are different types of passageways into the cell, just like there are different ways to get into your home, depending on who or what is trying to get through. So each method of passage through the cell membrane might be useful to different molecules. So facilitated diffusion is passive transport that uses integral membrane proteins to help larger, charged, hydrophilic, and polar molecules across a concentration gradient. Remember that integral membrane proteins span the phospholipid bilayer, connecting the inside and the outside.
So when we talk about the fluid movement actually happening within plants, we have to remember that plants do have a vascular tissue that connects the roots to the leaves of the plants. Now, there's a phloem, which transports the sugars that are made in the leaves and go around to the rest of the plants. So if we've got our plant here with the root system, and we got leaf here, sugars are made here, and it's the phloem that's going to circulate all the way around. Now, the xylem is a little bit different. It conducts water and dissolved nutrients into the root cells of every plant. And so the water is going to come in here and it's going to drive it up to the leaf. Right? And so just as we saw before, if you've got a high concentration of water outside of the root hair and a lower concentration inside, you're going to see the water come through. Now, when water passes through the membrane, this is osmosis. Now, those root hairs right? We've got a concentration of water in the soil that is higher than in the root cell, and so water enters it in by that osmosis process. It then goes to the xylem, which is the part of the tissue that circulates water, and as that water comes up, we create a pressure which pushes the water up part of the way. Now, the water is going to go to the leaves eventually where photosynthesis occurs. The leaves are flat, designed to absorb as much sunlight as possible. And we have these little tiny openings under the leaf that we call the stomata. And that allows for air to enter the leaf, supplying the leaf with the oxygen the cells need for respiration, the carbon dioxide that they need for the photosynthesis, and are surrounded by those guard cells. Right, so if you remember photosynthesis, is just where oxygen is and food are made, and they're made from carbon dioxide and water. Right? The energy to drive this is going to be that light.
In vascular plants, water and dissolved inorganic nutrients from the soil are transported upward against gravity in a cylindrical network of tubes called xylem that runs all the way from the highest leaves to the tiniest tips of the deepest roots. The process begins when diffusion and osmosis draw water into millions of microscopic root hairs and into the xylem of the roots. This event results in a positive pressure called root pressure that actually pushes the sap a short distance up the xylem towards the leaves. Then the forces of adhesion take over as the water molecules, which possess weak electrical charges, cling to the walls of the xylem tubes. At the same time, cohesion between the electrically charged water molecules causes a long, unbroken column of water to form inside the xylem. In fact, it is these same forces that cause perfect spheres to form when water droplets splash. Cohesive forces also create the surface tension of water, which produces the strong elastic film seen here. Working together, the forces of cohesion and adhesion produce an effect known as capillary action that causes liquids in narrow spaces to flow upward. However, none of these activities are as important to upward water movement as a process called transpiration that takes place inside the leaves. During transpiration, evaporation causes water to escape into the atmosphere through tiny pores in the leaves called stomata. As water is pulled from between the microfibrils of the mesophyll cell walls, crescent-shaped menisci are formed. As these become more curved, the surface tension increases, creating a negative pressure that pulls water out of the cells and eventually out of the xylem, resulting in what is called transpirational pull. Transpirational pull is powered by the sun, which provides all the energy for evaporation. That is why the amount of upward water movement is always at its peak during the warmest, brightest times of day, and always at its least after the sun goes down.
So transpiration, water in the plant does not continually circulate through our bodies. and does not go back to the root system. Instead, it winds up actually leaving through the stomata in the leaves. And this loss of water is called transpiration. The water flows from the plant, that constant pushing from osmosis, that pulling from the transpiration helps the water particles, as water particles are also attracted to each other. That is the cohesion and adhesion that was talked about in that video, all combine to allow water to defy gravity and go up to the leaves, right? Because gravity is going down, but the water is going up, and all of this works together, right? And so we see that water coming through. That is what transpiration is. That water coming through the stomata on the underneath of the leaves. So page 137, numbers 1 to 8 is for homework. Teacher will give you the due date depending on, well, which year you're watching the video. Anyway, take care and have a great day, everyone.